Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is my commentary for the first episode of The Mummy, the animated series, entitled The Summoning. Scotland goes far too far down the map of Britain on that opening shot, and this opening scene with Alex, Rick, and Evie is very well done, I've always thought. Establishes the three of them, their characters, and their good relationship between the three of them very quickly and very engagingly. Evie finds this bit of ancient Moorish pottery that she's so proud of, and Alex says it's a lot of trouble to go through for a salad bowl, and Evie's full of what an important find it is. What was it used for? Well, salads mostly. Quite a good bit of humour that establishes the feel of the series, works pretty well, comes off in the way it's trying to come off, I've always thought. So yeah, I like this introductory scene quite a lot. We're going to go in a moment into the opening narration and opening music sequence with the unmistakable voice of Jim Cummings telling us what's going on in this particular version of the Mummy universe. And while that opening sequence runs through on these commentaries that I'm going to be doing for the series, I'm going to read to you the reviews I wrote about 6 months before the time that I'm recording these commentaries for the individual episodes. And as this is the first episode, I'm also going to read you the review I did for the whole series as the show begins here. Of course, this dominoes, pillars collapsing is reminiscent of the movies, isn't it? It's an interesting spot where bits of The Mummy and The Mummy Returns have influenced the cartoon, and there was certainly one of them, and I will be pointing out more. This is the introduction. Evil High Priest Imhotep. It gets very old very quickly, this intro, and requires fast forwarding when watching through the DVDs. However, it does show us in no uncertain terms that the backstory of Imhotep and the whole universe has been changed. It doesn't involve an Axe and a moon and any sort of sexual storylines. Imhotep in this is just an evil high priest who wants to rule the world, and we'll discuss how that affects him as a character, makes him different from the movies, not as good as the movies, as the series progresses. My review for the whole series goes, I love this series, 9 out of 10. Okay, so it's certainly not perfect. Most of the plot is driven by MacGuffin artefacts, the Scrolls of Thebes, the Puzzle of Horus, the Medallion of the Medjai, etc., and its runtime of barely 20 minutes per episode doesn't allow for the level of depth and development that some of the characters are crying out for. However, as an action-based fantasy cartoon series, I feel that it has a whole lot going for it. The characters and the voice work are very well done. Alex is a fantastic hero and protagonist, and I think the fact that the series becomes more and more the story of his journey is absolutely the right direction for it to take. Chris Marquette gives an extremely engaging, charismatic, and sensitive performance, and his changing voice perfectly mirrors the emotional and physical development of Alex as a character. John Schneider also does an excellent job as Rick, giving the character a pleasing Indiana Jones vibe. Ray DeLille and Tom Kenny may not provide the best English accents ever, but their performances are always on point. I do like what Jim Cummings does with Imhotep, although I think it's a shame that he doesn't get very much chance to engage in appropriate banter with the good guys. The locations and guest characters are always well conceived and well used. My particular favourites are Janet and Fadil, whose continuing relationship with Alex is the most interesting unexplored aspect of the series in my opinion. A lot more about them later, of course, and I do stand by everything I wrote there in that review. My review for this particular episode, a strong and enticing opening, 8 out of 10. This is a very good start to the series that sets up an overriding plot that is both sustainable and enticingly weaved into the established The Mummy universe, or at least into a new but appropriately familiar version of it. It introduces and establishes the main characters and their interplay very well, and also stands up as an adventure in itself, and I stand by that review for this particular episode as well. We saw there how it is a different version of the established movie canon. We've had the Book of the Dead, we've had Hamunaptra used slightly differently, and we've had the establishing scene there with Corlin Weasley, and we see that his motivation in the series is professional jealousy of Evie, and that's why Corlin is going to go and raise Imhotep and cause all these problems. And here is the introduction of Jonathan being chased down by people he owes money to and joining in the adventure that way, and that's quite a nice establishing scene for him as well. Alex said when they first saw the Zephyr there, "Can I drive it? Can I fly it?" And Evie says he can't, but don't worry, Alex, you will be flying the Zephyr in the second series, or at least the Zephyr's successor, the second Zephyr, which is very like the first Zephyr, but has several additional features. Alex also said bum in that scene. You can see how in some episodes scriptwriters may think Alex perhaps has an English accent like he does in The Mummy Returns, or at least a very different version of the character does in The Mummy Returns. What an excellent decision to cast a fantastic, charismatic, talented young American voice actor, Chris Marquette, to play Alex in this series with his own natural American accent. As I say in my review there, Jonathan and Evie, there's absolutely nothing wrong with what they do, but Alex wouldn't work nearly so well as the kid protagonist if he was doing a fake accent, I always think. And he comes together perfectly with his voice and with his look. They've erred on the side of orange hair for Alex, which of course goes perfectly complementary colour with his blue shirt, and the blue shirt is quite a striking visual image. Here's a boy hero for you. And that's what Alex certainly is, as we will see in this episode, and indeed every other episode. And here we are at Hamunaptra, and we're not exactly certain what type of history and established events that the O'Connells and Jonathan have with Hamunaptra and the Book of the Dead and Imhotep. Before, in this continuity, it's a version of the movie world, but things have happened slightly differently. As we know, Imhotep's backstory is different. Has Alex before ever done something like what he's about to do, slip on the manacle of Osiris and not managed to get it off? The version of Alex in The Mummy Returns did exactly the same thing with the bracelet of Anubis, which is obviously what inspires this whole thing. But it's been turned into a whole status quo for the series, Alex, and the manacle, and various adventures because of Alex putting on the manacle. And yeah, that works really well as an overriding premise for the series, chasing after the Scrolls of Thebes in order to deal with that situation, and that's why Imhotep and the O'Connells are racing each other around the world, trying to beat each other to certain interesting geographical locations worldwide. That's why the first series makes a lot of sense in its setup, I think, and as I will come on to say while doing commentaries of the second series, I think the first series has a lot over the second series in terms of how much sense it makes with its globe-trotting chases and adventures. And I do very much overall prefer the first series to the second, as you will hear from my reviews and scores. And it will also turn out, however, that some of my very favourite episodes, my two particular favourites overall, are actually in the second series, which I think has some moments, some episodes of absolute brilliance, but overall, consistently, the quality and the sense that it makes as a believable, tangible universe is much lower in Series 2 than it is in Series 1. And here we are, almost 10 minutes into the episode, almost halfway through, and the title character appears on screen. Imhotep has been raised from the dead, and in a moment he's going to start talking English, which is going to help. It's not something he does in the films, except in that scene on the train. I know you can understand me, he says to Alex, and then we can understand him as well. But yeah, as I say, Imhotep is the title character for this show, but I feel that he quite quickly becomes almost a redundant part of the show particularly in the second series, and we'll go on to talk about that in a lot more detail in the future. But with only the dimension of being the evil high priest, wanting the manacle, wanting the Scrolls of Thebes, there's only so much you can do with him, and he's not that sustainable, and there's not a lot for him to do in the series except rage and destroy things and shout at Colin Weasler, and I don't think he has the legs creatively that a title character really needs, and certainly he doesn't have the legs of Alex and indeed most of the other good guys. I'll be commenting on that phenomenon plenty as we go through the series. That's the first of Alex's manacle visions, sometimes used pretty well, sometimes not. And here we are, a very familiar scene, or it will become a very familiar scene. Here's Imhotep and Weasler. They've come for the manacle, and there it is on Alex's wrist, and consequences occur. We're about to get the introduction here of Ardeth Bay, and this provides some interesting thoughts about what is the continuity so far, how much is it like or unlike the movie continuity. Weasler says there, "Have you met my friend Imhotep?" And, well, perhaps we're not entirely sure whether they have met Imhotep before or not. I tend to think that they have. Doesn't anybody stay dead around here, says Rick. The continuity from the movies, it's not the same continuity, but they've had similar adventures and encountered Imhotep before. Certainly they've encountered Ardeth Bay before. Rick's saying we've got to stop meeting like this. So yeah, something like the two movies has already happened and the characters know each other. But as we can tell from Imhotep's backstory, and some of the things that are revealed along the way, it's a little different in this cartoon continuity, which it really nearly always is in cartoon continuity based on the movies. And really, it kind of has to be to work as a sustainable 20-25 minute show. And there's where they first discuss the Scrolls of Thebes, and Ardeth mentions the Scrolls of Thebes, and Imhotep's going to be after the Scrolls of Thebes so he can get the manacle off Alex and use it himself, and we're going to be after the Scrolls of Thebes so we can get the manacle off Alex. At least that's what they think they're going to be doing with them at the moment. And here is a very interesting bit where Alex uses the mirror to signal his family, allies in the Zephyr. And Imhotep goes to Alex here after stealing the watch mirror. "You would have made an excellent Medjai warrior." Now, have they thought of this already? Alex becoming the Medjai warrior? I suspect they have. It's the obvious thing to do as the series progresses, and of course it is at the end of Series 1 that Ardeth says to Alex, "I'm going to train you in the ways of the Medjai." So, an intriguing thought about times to come in the series there. This bit always reminds me of an episode of Extreme Ghostbusters called The Crawler, where the bug demon Kohila says to Egon, "You should be careful who you're locking up and studying. You never know when the situation could be reversed." And when Imhotep there is dragging and chucking Alex around, I think to him, well, you should be careful, Imhotep. You never know when that situation might be reversed. And if we skip forward 26 episodes to the very end of Season 2, that situation is reversed, where Alex is the one dragging and throwing Imhotep around all over the place, in a conclusion that I will talk about in great detail when the time comes. And Alex has taken the first steps on the journey towards that confrontation already. You'll see the Zephyr suffer a lot of damage throughout the series. They carry patches on board to patch up the blimp bit, and that certainly needed doing quite often. The windscreen often gets broken. The rope ladder gets cut short in various places almost every time you see it. But the Zephyr apparently is self-repairing a lot of the time because it's always back in a serviceable condition not long after you see it get completely destroyed. Until, to be fair, the end of this series, the penultimate episode of this series, where it gets burned and does have to be replaced with a new, cooler Zephyr in the second series. And we're coming to the final confrontation of this episode. See here, everyone has a part to play in saving the Zephyr from the Black Scarabs. The British Region 2 DVD release tells us that the series contains a lot of exciting quests involving family teamwork. And yes, that's certainly very true. Family teamwork is a consistent and compelling aspect of this series. And the relationships between O'Connells, Jonathan are generally very good and very nice to watch, and they all support each other emotionally as well as physically. And yeah, an excellent aspect to the series. Of course, Weasler hasn't found the Scrolls of Thebes, and this is going to be a very common thing to happen throughout the first series. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm about to find the Scrolls of Thebes, and then, oh no, actually the Scrolls of Thebes aren't there at all. Where are the Scrolls of Thebes? Well, they're actually in the catacombs in Paris, as it turns out, but there's a heck of a lot to get through before we find that out. Unless you're watching, I think, the video release called Quest for the Lost Scrolls, which actually contained the first 2 episodes of the first series, and the final 2 episodes of the first series, as a kind of continuous quest, which just goes to show, as I will point out why in the next episode commentary, a lot of the series is a complete wild goose chase after the scrolls on the trail of Alexander the Great that actually comes to nothing. But as I say, it makes sense as a reason to do what they need to do for the status quo of the cartoon, and it makes for some thrilling quests and exciting family teamwork and a very good, exciting children's fantasy adventure cartoon, so I've got no complaints to make about that. And here Alex uses the power of the manacle for the first time to defeat all these undead warriors and save Rick from the statue that Imhotep's about to drop on him. And we see the direction the series is going in here. Maybe this thing isn't so bad after all, says Alex. Yes, indeed, maybe not. And this is where Imhotep goes all purple. You see, for the first time, but certainly not for the last time in the series, some fast footwork from Alex there to get the Book of the Dead to Evie. Alex is going to be making some very good use of his legs and feet during the series, as I will doubtless point out, because I like it when he kicks stuff. And here we go, Imhotep's going all purple. And this is why he looks purple for the whole series, and apparently his powers are diminished, because he's stuck halfway between death and undeath and life or whatever. That's as much of an explanation as you need. And yeah, apparently his powers are now diminished, not what they once were, but really Imhotep can do or not do with his powers whatever they want him to be able to do or not be able to do throughout the series. But yeah, certainly very forgivable and understandable why that is the case in this 20-minute cartoon series. Yep, and we're setting up here. Oh, Imhotep's going to come after us for the manacle. And we're going to go looking for the Scrolls of Thebes, and yep, that's how it's going to go. And this one was written by Tom Pugsley and Greg Klein, who developed the series for television. Excellent work, Tom Pugsley and Greg Klein, developing the series, taking a good amount from the movies, and giving the show its own particular feel and mythos as well. And I'll be saying more about that as well in future commentaries. But that's the end of that episode, so I hope you've enjoyed this commentary, and hopefully you'll join me soon for another one on the second episode, A Candle in the Darkness.